Chapter 14 in your biology book in section 2, we're going to get into the hominid fossils, the evidence against evolution. So we're going to go into all of these strange fossil concoctions to represent the missing link between apes and man. We're going to talk about Darwin and the descent of man, of course, and then on to the Piltdown man, the Nebraska man, the Rama's ape, the southern ape, Lucy, the handyman, the upright man, the Java man, the Peking man, the Neanderthal man, and the Cro-Magnon man. So you're going to learn a lot from this. So let's get going. Darwin and the Descent of Man. He wrote it in 1871, so about 10 years before he died. Darwin pointed out the similarities between man and other animals and came to the false conclusion that man is the most evolved form of animal. So he just thought man must be evolved the most. But this contradicts the Bible, we know that. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Genesis 2:7. Man became a living soul. Man is made, mankind, man and women are made in the likeness of God. Now Darwin said that man came from monkeys. In fact, he wrote New World and Old World monkeys, and from the latter, at a remote period, man proceeded. So he did say that man came from monkeys, although modern evolutions have modified this and these ideas to now claim that man evolved from apes, or ape-like creatures that are now extinct, not necessarily monkeys. Now it is true there are some similarities in the overall body plan of the ape and man. The 5 fingers, opposite thumbs, the 5-toed feet, and facial muscles are similar, right? However, there are also many important differences. And here we have a picture here of man and ape, and then they always want to develop that transitional figure in between man and ape. The differences between man and ape. Well, number 1, there's moral and spiritual differences, right? You don't see the apes, seeking God and going to church, right? You don't see them talking about lying or repenting. I mean, those things we know for sure are moral and spiritual differences. But then there are other differences, like the skulls and the teeth are different. The arms of the ape are longer than the legs, yeah? And man's feet are arched for upright walking, and apes don't walk upright. And that man has short toes. Apes have longer toes for grasping. The most important difference is that man is created in the image of God. Here we have some skulls there, the difference. The chimpanzee, Australopithecus, he is a chimpanzee type. There's a human, the Basma skull number 24, baboon, Galaida, so you see some of those skulls. And we're going to be talking about those now. I'm not going to go over this whole thing, but you can see here the differences between the ape and man. The volume of the chimp's brain case is less than that of the brain case of a human. So human has more brains, huh? And then you have that brow ridge is present. They have a ridge over their brow there, and then down into all the way. I'm not going to read all these things. You can look at it or look back. You see the pelvises are different. The hand bones are different. The toes are different. There's a lot of differences you can see in the skeleton of a man right there and the skeleton of an ape. So the evolutionists had to put forth an imaginary family tree. Paleontologists have found many fossils of extinct apes and ancient humans since 1871. They made it a mission to go out there and find as many fossils of apes and humans to find this missing link, right? The family tree was constructed from skeletons taken from various parts of the world: East Africa, Indonesia, Northern China, Northern Europe. And you can see how they put together man becoming taller and more erect, more intelligent, and more human-like. They emphasize the brain becomes larger and the jaw smaller. But scientists are no closer to proving Darwin's hypothesis of evolution, of human evolution, than they were in the day of Darwin's day. They still haven't made advances in this particular area at all. After a century and a half of thousands and thousands of fossils, only a handful of alleged transitional forms, and many of them have come from badly fragmented bone pieces, have been presented. See, and all of these bone pieces can be considered either 100% man or 100% ape. No traditional bones. Or I should say transitional. I said traditional, transitional bones. No missing links. Here we have a picture, the family tree and what they put together with skulls. You can see, you don't have to really know this one because I believe it's so contrived. You know, how did they know where to put this on the family tree? It's a bunch of baloney. I'm sorry. Piltdown man. Okay, let's start with them all. We're going to start with the Piltdown. Eoanthropodus, Piltdown. And this is one of the most famous early human fossils of the 20th century, like 1908 and 1911. Dawn man, they called him, or Piltdown man, because the fossil was discovered in a gravel pit near Piltdown, England. And it was discovered by an amateur paleontologist named Charles Dawson. Not Charles Darwin, Charles Dawson. So he was an amateur. So this fossil, he found this fossil and it consisted of a fragment, but clearly he thought it was a human-like skull, right? Along with an ape-like jaw. So here he has putting this together, thinking this must be our missing link. The Piltdown was found beside crude tools that were carved from the rocks, and also some bones of some so-called extinct structures. So what happened with this Piltdown man? See a picture of him. As I go through, you'll see the pictures. I found pictures of them. Piltdown man is a fraud. Over 40 years, they thought proof that this man evolved was a Piltdown. So everyone was like, oh man, we actually found the missing link. You know, in 1953, though, it was revealed as a hoax. Apparently, someone had carefully filed down the teeth of an orangutan's jaw to make the jaw look like it was a human jaw, and treated it with chemicals to make it look like it was ancient, and buried it alongside a human skull fragment to be easily found so they could find out, oh, they could find it right away. So, paleontology is based on faith instead of facts. This was not a fact. I like the Piltdown hoax whodunit because now it's coming out really whodunit. And it has to do with Darwin's, family, his sons and such. They went in, basically going in and getting involved in all of this. And you'll find the guy, and I'll go into another video on that. But it could have been part of his family trying to make it happen, right? So it was a hoax, but they don't really know for sure who has done this. But we do know who was involved in really supporting this Piltdown man. And it was a total fraud. And they had to have known it was a fraud. Nebraska man. Hesperopithecus. Nebraska man. You don't have to remember these Latin names of these things. So Nebraska man, came from Nebraska. It was reconstructed from a single tooth that someone found in Nebraska. A single tooth in 1922. So they took this tooth and they had imaginative illustrations that were portrayed by this Nebraska man as this brutish creature, half man and half ape, who lived in caves and walked with a shuffling, stooped posture, just from a tooth. And they accepted this for years until it was revealed that the tooth did not come from a man at all, but an extinct pig. Oh my goodness. That is really embarrassing. Rama's ape, Ramapithecus. Ramapithecus in the 1930s. This is what they found there. You see that picture of what they found. And then what they drew from that picture. How did they know to draw that? Well, the Rama's ape was a medium-sized ape, originally reconstructed from a few teeth, heavy bone, and heavy jawbone, I should say, and fragments of facial bones. And it was quickly assumed to be the ancestor of man because it possessed certain human-like features, such as smaller front teeth than other apes. So they were just going on the teeth. And it was found that the teeth actually had been assembled incorrectly. Wow. Evolutionists assumed it would walk upright, but they found no fossil of hip bones or leg bones at all, just teeth. The discovery of a complete Ramapithecus skull in 1979 revealed that it was a modern orangutan. Not even ancient, it was a modern orangutan. Somebody, maybe the enemy, maybe this is satanic, they're making up stuff so they can go against what God says in his Bible, maybe? But definitely now, another fraud. Southern ape, Australopithecus. This is famous. They have a lot of Australopithecus, and they have different kinds of Australopithecus. This was the Tong child, a small ape skull discovered in 1924 by South African professor Raymond Dart. He named it Australopithecus africanus, so in South Africa, right? The skull was that of a juvenile ape, but the fossils of adults were found later, so they found more fossils of the Australopithecus. And it was regarded, this Australopithecus africanus, as a human ancestor until the 1970s, when it was dismissed as merely an extinct ape. And some even teach now that this still is the missing link. You gotta be kidding. Australopithecus boisei. Australopithecus boisei was discovered by Dr. Louis Leakey. And he lived in 1903 to 1972, and his wife Mary, who lived in 1913 to 1996. So they found this in 1959. So it was found in Olduvai Gorge in Kenya, Africa. And they found a skull broken into like 400 pieces. Oh my goodness, broken into 400 pieces, really? But they were certain, even before they unearthed it, that it was a human ancestor. So that this is it, we found it. 400 pieces of it? You gotta be kidding. Originally, it was named Zinjanthropus, an East African man. And the fossils were proclaimed as almost human. But it was not almost human, but fully ape. Lucy. Have you ever heard of Lucy? Australopithecus afarensis, or afarensis. I can't pronounce that, sorry. Let's just say Australopithecus. And it was original based on a chimpanzee-sized fossil nicknamed Lucy. The fossil was about 40 inches tall, but then they found the males would be 59 inches tall. I don't know if they found any males, but that's what they said. And all had ape-sized brains. And the curved toes were presumably suitable for grasping, like most apes. And the skulls were chimpanzee-like. And now it's considered to be an extinct ape. Calling them a human ancestor was nothing more than speculation. She is an extinct ape. Australopithecus afarensis. So some evolutionists teach that afarensis, evolved from another extinct ape named A. anaminis. So we have these names. They're based on fossils found in 1995. Several others have been found, including A. robustus and A. Australopithecus. So we have others that have been found. So they're finding more of these little creatures, right? But these have been uniformly acknowledged as extinct apes. Handyman, Homo habilis. Homo habilis was considered handyman. And evolutionists teach that an Australopithecine ape evolved into a handyman, this missing link, in 1964. Handyman appears to have been a small chimpanzee-like creature with a small brain. The shattered fossils were later shown to indeed be more chimpanzee-like. Some of these animals were only 43 inches tall. That's not very tall. In Kenya, more handyman bones were found to have larger leg bones and larger skulls. The skull 470 was incompletely battered, or completely, I should say, badly shattered, that couldn't be identified as an ape or human. So they had a lot of shattered bones. Then the leg bones were found some distance away from, in good condition and unmistakably human. So they found these leg bones that they thought were human, but they were about, 50 feet or quite a distance from the handyman skull. So they really couldn't apply it, but they did. So here we have the handyman picture of there. Wow, there he is. But again, problems in putting bones together, putting bones of a man together maybe, and bones of an ape together, and then devising what you think they look like. The larger Homo habilis handyman, they found some larger ones. It was classified as H. rudolphus. So H. rudolphus was the name of this creature here, this so-called missing link. And many believe these should be classified as apes, while the larger fossils, such as 148, should be classified as fully human. That's the number, they number them as a number 148. So they had some, this larger one, they had some that they said were human. In this view, the Homo habilis is actually a mixture of human and ape fossils and should not be considered a transitional form at all, a missing link at all between apes and man. So basically, they're taking some bones from the human beings and some bones, again, from the apes and calling them the missing length. Java man, Homo erectus, which means upright, because man basically walks upright. In 1893, a Dutch scientist named Eugene Dubois, he lived 1858 to 1940. He discovered a fossilized skull fragment and a leg bone on Java, an Indonesian island. So they named him the Java man. The skull cap had heavy brow ridges, but the femur was identical to a modern human being. So he thought, wow, we have definitely a missing link, part human and part ape, right? And Dubois assumed that they belonged to an ape man, even though they had been found 50 feet apart again. So the human had been found 50 feet apart from the part of the ape, from the skull. The leg had been found 50 feet apart. He claimed the bones were 500,000 years old. But the rock where they were found was only 500 years old because they had frequent floods there and volcano eruptions. And so the rock could only be 500 years old, but he said it was 500,000. Another mistake? Dubois also discovered a normal human skull in the same place, but he kept this secret for 30 years. So in the same place next to it, he found a normal modern human skull. And he kept it secret because obviously if the Java man was in the same rock layer with the modern man, he could not be the man's ancestor. So he took it away and was lying about some things. Dubois was not truthful. Peking man, Sinanthropodus pekinensis. So Peking man, let's just call him the Peking man, was very similar to the Java man and had that ape-like characteristics, but they were again exaggerated. Here we have a picture of him in China. Can you believe that? So They both were classified as Homo erectus, upright men. But because of Dubois' haphazard methods, and the Peking man's fossils were suddenly lost. They thought they had them, but during World War II, they were lost. So they couldn't look at them anymore. But they still said that there was a Peking man, even though they didn't have the fossils. So both of these are very controversial. Homo erectus fossils. Other fossils were classified as Homo erectus, including more than 100 fossils found in Africa and Asia that are undoubtedly human, although they do possess some unusual skeletal features. So they found a lot of these Homo erectus fossils. And thick skulls, heavy ridges above the eyes, low sloping foreheads, acute facial angles, large teeth, and receding chin on some of these fossils. But the brain size was definitely human, and they were intelligent. They used tools, and they painted, and they put together a fire, and they cremated their dead. The rest of the skeleton was identical to the modern humans. So basically, what were they? They were humans. Here's some pieces of bones they used to put together these Homo erectus fossils. They took just pieces of bones. This is just like one little piece of bone to say that this was a missing link. Then they found the Homo erectus, they called it a giant boy. This is kind of crazy. It must have actually been a boy that had a problem with his growth hormone, right? Because he was a 12-year-old boy and he was like 73 inches tall, which is pretty tall. And it's likely that these fossils represent an extinct group of humans with vitamin deficiencies. Basically, he thought he had a vitamin deficiency, and that made him grow a problem with his growth hormone. But they tried to make him as a missing link. Here's some other pictures of the so-called missing links there. Neanderthal man. Oh, you know about Neanderthal man. Homo neanderthalensis. Homo neanderthalensis is in 1856 in a limestone cave on a cliff in Germany in the Neander Valley. They found some of these fossils. The fossils were said to be ape-like, such as heavy brows and sloping foreheads. And the fossils were assembled as having stooped posture. So they took these fossils and they assembled them, but they put them like they had stooped posture like an ape, which they didn't have, and to make them seem like they were subhuman. And then more fossils were found across Europe, and they all began to turn up of the Neanderthals. And so these imaginative paleontologists in Europe and America reconstructed an entire race of these brutish cavemen with slouched over gorilla-like postures. And the models, though, of the Neanderthal families, they put together the families, and you could see them in museums, actually, and they'll have these naked, brutish, savage-looking cavemen type that began to flood the museums as missing links. I remember in our museum, when I grew up, I'd go in and say, wow, they really found all these Neanderthals, look at them. And they put them in caves, and they called them cavemen. The Neanderthal cavemen. The examination later on of these skeletons eventually burst this evolutionary bubble. What do you say? It wasn't evolutionary at all. The Neanderthal man was not a shuffling brute, but a rather true human being who stood upright with the intelligence of a person today, with even larger, more powerful muscles and stronger bones, and their brain was even larger than our modern humans. He was a moral and a spiritual being, burying his dead and caring for the elderly and crippled. So he had a spiritual part of him in this essence. Evolutionists now admit they were fully human. They were called Homo sapiens Neanderthals. And you know what? The DNA proves this, that they were fully human. The Neanderthals lived the same time as modern humans. They just looked a little bit different on their foreheads. Here's one young boy, and as you go down here, they lived in the caves, but they were just like regular human beings. The last is the Cro-Magnon man. And this was the last link. We wonder why we don't have any more links, because we have DNA now. So when they do get a link, they can't make it up anymore with bones, because they can test it by DNA. The last link is basically this Cro-Magnon man. And he was discovered in 1868 in southwest France, in a cave. And he was described as a subhuman caveman. But now evolutionists admit that they were identical to modern humans, although they have a bit larger brain than the average person, which you would think they would have less of a brain, but they didn't. They were a tribe of people who lived in the caves and hunted bison. They're now considered Homo sapiens sapiens humans, human beings. Confusion and turmoil. Although many evolutionists speculate that the A. afarensis was basically evolved into the H. erectus, so these two different things, which evolved into the sapiens, there's much turmoil within the evolutionary ranks. Evolutionists sometimes refer to other ancient humans as H. erectus. So here we have, they don't agree on anything. Fossils such as the Rhodesian man or the Hildebrand man were fully human fossils with unusual skeletal features called archaic Homo sapiens. And Homo heidelbergensis by others. So here we have, they're trying to label all these different people and figure out how they can make them into missing links and say, oh, we got it all together. And they can't even agree at all on these things. So as you see here, I'm not going to go over this whole thing, because basically you can see how it gets really crazy on which one of these came from the other one, and which one evolved into this one, and how they evolved into man. It gets crazy. Homo sapiens, or extinct apes. From the creationist perspective, those that believe in the Bible, all fossils can either be regarded as Homo sapiens, human, or Australopithecines, which are types of extinct apes. So they're either going to be Homo sapiens, which are human beings, or they're going to be apes. Man has always been man. The evolutionists' confusion has been well over a century, and they even are confused among each other now. Here's some pictures of some of the pictures that they've drawn, and you can see as you go, we went through all of those all the way on, to just describing these, and none of them really very valid. Man has always been man. Evolutionists fail to realize or take into account God's account of how man was created. God's account is very clear, concise, and totally complete. There is nothing in his record that would lead us to believe that man arose from animals by an evolutionary process. No place in the Bible does the Bible talk about evolution. On the contrary, we are told that God himself shaped and fashioned man from the dust of the ground and then breathed into his nostrils to give him life. Genesis 2:7. And that's the truth, the whole truth. Amen.